All right. Welcome to Blender Brunch Bros, 12 to 1 Mondays. Oh, let me go ahead and turn off. Looks like I got some feedback going in. Let me try moving my receiver. Oh, it actually does sound a little bit better. Send the link to the necessary groups. All right, what else? That's good for now. Okay, so last we were at Blender Brunch Brewing. I was working on the barrel of ale, I believe. I've since made just a little loop for it. I can't remember how far I got with the rigging, uh, but yeah, so that's all ready to go, and I've put that in the assets folder in my Unity project. For those people who, one second, I've got monitor on, and there's a bit of a delay, so I just can't think. Uh, oh, it's in recording. Okay. Great. If there wasn't the lag time, I would definitely listen to it. Just it's the same thing as like when you're like recording songs. I believe that you want to hear yourself to make sure that your audio is coming in correctly, but it's too much lag. All right. Yeah. So last we were working on stuff. I was working on the barrel, but this is ready to go, and I want to get the rest of the characters ready. So the main characters that I'm working with right now are the hero characters, which all I have is like a placeholder mesh for. So I basically haven't started that other than a test, just kind of biped looking thing with a rig. Um, and then I've got the female noble, which I put some work into, but still missing a lot of parts. Um, Today I want to experiment with getting the kind of the fluff of this neck thing going. So I'm going to go ahead and add some alpha cards to this. I think I'm going to start with just making one, and I'm going to make it on its own texture. But I'll just do something like this. And I'll make it give it its own material. What's this? Lace ends. And I'll assign it, and I'll give it an image texture. Oops, not a magic texture. Image texture, make it new. Can I do an eyedropper for this? I don't think so. I'm just gonna make it a base gray, and I should be able to match it pretty easily later on. I'll just call this lace ends diffuse. 1024 by 1024 is probably way bigger than we need it, but I can always change it later. And then for unwrapping, I am just going to turn off this. This kind of syncs your selection. It's a little bit complicated for when you use it versus when you don't, but if you're ever having a tough time in the UV editor with Blender, you should definitely consider toggling this on and off and see if that makes it easier to do what you're trying to do. Um, Okay, so unwrap, and I'm only going to use a bit of it because I might want different types of feathers to throw around, or lace ends, I guess. They're not really feathers. Um, yeah, so let's start with that for now. Do I have, okay, great. I have another reference image over here. And then I'm just going to try to do it. Now, I do need alpha as well, and I'm always forgetting how to set the material correctly so that I can paint alpha. But first things first. Oh, did I make? Oh, I didn't make the image with alpha. I'm just gonna make another one. Lace ends to diffuse. I'm sure I could save over it with alpha or something like that, but I'm not exactly sure on the process. So I'm just gonna do that and navigate to Blender Brunch Bros. All right, great. And let's go ahead and jump into texture paint. Okay, I'm on the right material. Want to make sure that I've got this face selected. I think I've got, do I have Shift Alt? Oh no, I don't have a hotkey for this. Oh, what have I done? Okay. Because I don't have a hotkey for that right now. But I'll just toggle it by clicking the button for now. And if you hold down S, you can get the source texture. And I'm going to set our strength to 1 so I can just make this texture as close as it can be. It's not perfectly blending in as I would want it to. Oh, maybe I have to switch materials. Does that change? Oh, did I set it to? Oops, I need to set it to the new. Oops, to the new texture. Okay. Hmm. I guess is this a shading thing? Let me switch it to. Textured solid. Okay, I guess that is correct then. And it's just a shading issue. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get the alpha to show up correctly. So the trick that I'm trying to go for here is I'm trying to make, woo, yeah, I'm trying to make the the lace have that kind of complicated contour edge, um, where basically, it looks like lace and all that. So the main thing that I want to do is make sure I have to set to color and alpha, and then I want to erase. Okay, looks like it's already working in textured solid mode. So if I can see this viewport displayed correctly already, then that's great. So in that case, um, I'm just going to try emulating some of the lace there. Looks like it's kind of like a butterfly, almost insect-like looking pattern with little squigglies. It might be easier to make the kind of big shapes and then draw the lines back in. So I'm going to try that. And then make it a lot smaller, switch it to add alpha. You can also set it to add alpha just while you're drawing. I'm sure this looks pretty bad, or I know this looks pretty bad right now, but I'm just trying to get some main shapes going. I'm not using a tablet either, so my line curves are not going to look that pretty, but I'm just trying to get started and move along. Definitely my approach overall with a lot of projects is even if I'm not a huge fan of how it's looking, to just kind of push onwards and then even though sometimes I'll get to the point where I restart something from scratch, um, I'm able to develop my ideas while I'm working on something related to those ideas, and that can kind of give me the what's it called, the inspiration that I need. Right now, I've got it set to, or well, I don't have it set. It's set by default, I guess, to a clip transparency sort of thing. I think that's kind of suits what I'm going for in general. Going to blot out the beginning of this so that I can bring in some more patterns that I'm seeing. And of course, I'm not doing any color right now. I'm just doing alpha and a very experimental alpha. I'm just going to make this a little bigger. I'll make this one a little smaller. Maximize the viewport too, and go into edit mode, tap something, and then align view to cursor. And this will be duplicated a lot of times, so it doesn't have to be perfect anyways. It just has to read somewhat correctly from far away. And look good when it's stacked on top of itself, which it might not. We will see. I do like to do a little bit of work and then immediately start trying to stack it on top of itself. Looks like a big part of this is these sort of ruffles, dips going on as well. So once I duplicate this a few times, I may try to either add that shape on top of this. Actually, that's probably a good idea. That idea. Or I could build it into the mesh. I could add a bunch of extra vertices here. Use an image as an alpha too. Yeah, that's true. I could use a source texture. That would also work. And there are some tricks you can do, like for example, if I subdivide this plane and then I bring it over here, I can actually take the edge all the way to one end and then have it loop back past itself, and then you can actually also determine where you're mirroring at. It's just a way to extend the texture, or also even though I'm essentially duplicating it in one segment, I'm extending it, so that's actually giving it some variation too. And maybe it would be good even to duplicate this because then it could work on the mirror really well. Let's go ahead and do that. It's looking pretty bad right now, and that's totally okay. We're just trying to get some basic stuff, and I realized that I'm not actually connecting these planes quite yet. Just placing them in the front. I'm going to have maybe some more separation there, so I'm going to keep these separated. Okay. Looks like the ones in front actually even just kind of come straight out almost. Take these up. What I'm going to do is actually, let's see, what is going on with this mesh? Actually, before I mess with this too much more, I'm going to take this and duplicate it, maybe put it in the crack, and then I'm just going to try stretching it inwards and see what that looks like. Now this is probably going to be a good time to use more of my source texture, so I use some extra texture space so I can switch up the texture because this is looking pretty weird. Just going to kind of align it. Here, I'll turn on screencast. Make it a little bit smaller though. All right. And definitely looks like it starts becoming flat when it gets in towards the center and kind of dips in. So I'm going to raise this up, try to make this follow. Follow that sort of interesting dip. Okay. Just trying to get a shape that I'm happy with. Might even turn off the textures briefly to get a better idea of what I'm looking at. Shrink these in because they got offset from where I want them to go. Again, I haven't connected them yet. It's my plan to. There we go. Oh, I've got these things. It's just, I'm not going to recreate them at another time, so let's just delete those for now. Like I want to build out another hair shape just to make it a little bit more similar to the concept and help me judge the collar element better. Give the impression that the hair is, somewhat bundled up by resting on the collar thing going on here. But there might be a chance that this could make it a bit weird. Because I've got autocorrect texture set, it's causing some weird errors. Sometimes that can be really helpful to automatically have your UVs adjust, but sometimes it looks a little strange. Okay. Back to, so I guess it's, it's in solid textured mode that it's showing me the clipped alphas. Interesting. I guess that's just a default. let's go ahead and change the UVs of this thing. Select this so I can make sure it's oriented the same way. Yeah, it is. Okay, and I'm just going to put this here. I think there's a possibility that I bring in another texture, so I'm going to still leave room for something else over here, and maybe even a little bit up there. Not the most efficient, but I could always reproject the textures later too. Great, and we're going to save the image with Alt-S. Very important you do Alt-S and not Alt-R. Alt-R is reload, and you will lose your texture. That's one time you want to be really careful with your hotkeys, is saving the textures. I'm going to give extra room, I think, for the neck. Even though you don't see any of the neck skin under this blue thing here, I might extend the blue thing, the blue texture. Actually, let me do that now. Oh, I do have Alt-D to toggle. Let's see what. Oh, I'm on Add Alpha instead of Mix. That's why. Just going to set the cursor there so I can refocus that. And I'm just going to paint. Oops. Guess I do want Alt-D on. Just this, just the skin. Alt-D. Oh, oops. Alt-D, not Control-D. Shadeless. I'm just going to kind of extend that. Actually going to hide everything else. Go ahead and extend this color under here, just in case there's clipping. I don't want it to look like there's this weird bright highlight for no reason under the head. I'll come back to working on the face some more later. Yeah. Maybe I'll clean up this edge just a little bit though. Definitely think the collar should be just a little bit tight, so it should be forming a little bit of a highlight. Okay. We'll stick with that for now. And I'm using the backslash to isolate select on what I'm selected on. But we're going to jump back in here, and now we're going to add some alpha to this plane. Jump to texture paint, jump to erase alpha. Let's see, got this selected. Why? Oh, maybe I need it to be 100%. Yep, that'll do it. And let's see, let's look at the reference real quick. It does look like they kind of shrink in. And I can also emulate that on this end, on the mesh end, not just the texture end. To bring some more alpha back. Is this not? Why isn't that working for me? normal net or a facing normal. Hmm. Strength is 1, and the race works. Oh no, it doesn't. Oh, do I need to be selected on this? I do. Let's see. All right, so I'm just going to add a little bit back because it has more of a flat edge. It's rounded some, but somewhat flat edge. And then I'm going to do a similar thing where I think it's like halfway down or like sort of maybe the last third uh, sort of had a pattern that sort of started to fade out towards the center like that. And I'm still like even testing out whether this is the technique that I want to be using, which is a great excuse for saying I'm doing a bad job and not worrying about it. But sometimes it can be fun to not take the quality too seriously because you can test out a lot of stuff. And you can then, after you've given it one shot, it's a lot of extra time, but you can start it over or make some changes where you know it'll count. I'm gonna clean up this edge a little bit. I might even shrink this and then stretch the end and like that. Then we're just going to try duplicating it a lot and see what it looks like. It's like the underside of this is so high up that we're seeing this actually. I'll drop that down. Sometimes it even helps to turn off textures for some placement. Oops. Oops. I do have mirror clip turned on, so once I touch that middle edge, it's will take control of the vertex and keeping it in the center there. Which could be a little bit annoying, but it's really nice most of the time. So I don't want to be too hard on it. I'm actually going to select 2 at a time, and maybe I'll even set the cursor to there and rotate it a little bit around. And we'll see how it looks in just a second. And sometimes it's better to check as you go, but it can also be a little bit anxiety producing because you put a lot of work into making the alpha cards, and a lot of the times they look a little bit off for a little while. Um, and that's just because alpha cards naturally look a lot different than regular mesh. The shading is different. Oh, I'm actually really liking the way this is starting to look. It does look very uniform. That is maybe a problem. Although lace does kind of have that uniform look. Also, seeing somewhat of a phallic shape emerging, so I'm going to add in some lines to break that up. um, do one line across like that, and another one there, another one there. Now I'm just gonna try to mix it up some. And again, I've got slide, or sorry, correct UVs on. So you'll notice when I hit GG, there's this little pop-up that's got correct UVs on, which means I can change the position of the vertices without warping much at all the UVs, which is really powerful for wanting to make mesh changes without changing the UVs and without sacrificing the way that the texture looks. Let me turn off Alt D so I'm not seeing that weird outline. I do want these to kind of come to the same place at the end when possible, or at least close. Because then it'll look like it's more part of the same piece of clothing, or whatever you call this thing. Might actually, see, how do I want to do this? I'll take this and I'll subdivide the end so I can break it up. It's just looking a little too uniform. Connect things. I don't have any 5-sided shapes. I'm just feeling a little bit laggy for me right now. I guess I've got streaming going, so that'll make an impact. Yeah, I just want it to feel a little bit more like it's part of these lace alpha card things that I'm making. Okay, that's a little better. I feel like it doesn't feel as big as I want it to. I'm going to set the cursor there and use period so that I can kind of grow all this. Maybe I'll select all the inner stuff and shrink it back in a little bit. I'm liking that I'm getting the dip now. Scale the rest just a little more. Okay, I'm starting to get the effect that I'm looking for. This is good. All right. Maybe I would have the bottoms coming up. Oops. Turn off the crosshairs. I could select them all at once and do this, but also gives me a chance to adjust it based on where I put the cards. All right. It still doesn't quite have the thickness feel to me that I'm going for. Maybe part of that is that these cards are not really aligned as much anymore. And also in the reference, the under ones kind of seem to be more visible and darker even. Maybe that would be one of the last things to do is to make a separate one, or maybe just make these darker. Let me just mix color without changing the alpha. Okay, don't want to affect the alpha. And let's start from this color and just make it, maybe I'll add a little bit of brown. I want to make the strength really low. Oh, need to make that selected. And you know what? Maybe I will add a little bit of alpha, again, at a very low opacity. Like that. Get a little bit more. I think I'd like to bring some of that same texture to the underside of this. Not add alpha, just, I want to switch to this. Just mix. I'm going to add this as a color. Make sure this is all selected since I'm in this mode. Is this even, oh, do I not have UVs for this? Oh, I don't at all. Okay, let's unwrap this then. This to be part of it. I'm just going to put this on its own texture without alpha. Save that. Let's do new. Actually, I'm going to put this with the rest of the model. I guess I don't actually have to join it, but that's fine. And then switch back to Noble 82. Just unwrap it again, scale it down, and then, oh, oops, unhide everything. Oh wow, this is terrible. UV map. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be reprojecting this at some point, but plenty of space for last minute additions at least, I guess. So I can do that. And now I think I will re-separate it actually. Now when I paint on it, I can get that darker color. Oops. What's going on? Is there two diffuse textures? Weird. Yeah, great. Unhide that so I can kind of see what's going on. And actually, the fact that I'm making this color darker will help reveal the lighter colored lace that's going on above it. Maybe I'll do kind of strips along the crack where these folds are. Just some general stripes. This also makes me feel like I need to add in some brighter color as well. So I'm going to do that. Let me save this. especially. Oh, what happened there? Oh, I see. Switch to that object. Make it slightly less. Yeah, like that. I'm just trying to bring in some detail on what would be like a relatively shiny, light catching area. Um, I'm just kind of being informed by the very low poly uh, light that's hitting this corner right here. And then I'll turn the opacity way down to make it more of a gradient. And I'm going to go back to my dark color, make it a bit darker even, and bring in more detail on this underside, which gets a lot darker again. Then maybe I'll paint in a lighter color so that we get those lace shapes. Let's see how that looks. That's good. I do want kind of some of that gradient color on these as well. So I'm going to make it, oops. Yeah, low opacity, bring it more towards the white. And less pink, more white. And then a little bit more dark. Made up that. Just going to focus on one of these. It's getting a little bit too dark, but it is getting that effect of seeing the shadow. Let me just bring some highlights back in. Try to paint in some more detail. Oh, that's very pink. It's getting very laggy on me. Just gonna isolate. Select. A little better. Maybe even on some of these alpha ridges. And I'll do the same thing. Some darker. Make it a lot. Not going too far. I need to do some adjustment. There's a lot of clipping happening, which is becoming a little bit distracting, and it's a little dark too. See if there's a way I can preview the alpha on these. that. We're on the right. Yeah, I'm on license. I set to a transparent one. There's just a viewport display thing. Okay, let's see. Alpha clip. Oh, there we go. And then let me make the clip threshold a little higher. It's lovely. Definitely different than it looks there. Very fun. Okay. Looks a lot better than I thought it would. Great. I'm going to maybe change up the sizing on some of these planes just to give it a little bit more variation. And pick winners and losers and, what goes on top in a lot of these places. Just because the clipping can be pretty distracting. I want these under ones to be rotated more down in general. Definitely once you get into the later stages of alpha card setup, it's just a huge blast because you're just making all these tiny little adjustments with tons and tons of cards, and it's like kind of like a magical effect that one card you could easily pick out, but when you get a bunch of them all together, your eyes get a little bit lost in the trick that you're playing, and if you're lucky, it's not a waste of time, and it actually works at a certain point. And you're just like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. And yeah, and the image reference again. Another reason you should always use references. It kind of inspired me to say, okay, well the ones underneath are darker because of the top one's casting shadows, but you can just emulate that by having a different texture on the bottom. I'll try duplicating these and shrinking some of these. I'd love to be able to make one that kind of cuts. Oops, let me switch from island to edge. That's more of a sliver off these. We could get away with a few of these. Even have this end shrink in a little bit. It's cool. Very cool. I think I would like a little bit more of a highlight. Let's see what I can do. If I turn on wireframe with, I've added my own hotkey, but it's like in here somewhere. You can just turn on. Yeah, there it is. Wireframe can be a huge help to painting. Let's see if I can bring in just a little more of a highlight. Don't know if that's going through. Okay, it is. It's just already that bright, I guess. Doesn't seem like it's changing the color. Oh, I guess it's just that light of a change. Oh, okay. Why does that one stand up so much? I guess I'm scaling some of them up. I got a little carried away. Let me see if I can still keep it that big, but maybe round off the corners some more. But yeah, it's starting to look so good that I feel a little bit bad. I feel like I've neglected the rest of the model a little bit. So maybe I'll go back and work on that some more. Let's see. Let me bring back some of my references. Turn off the wireframe all the time. All right, what do I want to work on next? I guess I'd like the dress to look a lot better. I'm just going to add in some extra points and just kind of add an arbitrary fold that matches the reference. That. Maybe just to break up the contour, I'll add in some extra subdivisions just on the contour edge, front facing. That can give the impression that there's a lot more going on than there really is. Make it a little bit smoother up here. Maybe I'll get into her kind of billowing sleeve things. All right, well, I'm running out of time, but that was really fun making these alpha cards. Um, Could definitely touch them up a little bit so they look better from all angles, but overall, I think it looks pretty good, especially for the limited time spent painting with them. Definitely, I could do something to bring them all together a little bit better at the neck, and maybe even there's a lot that I could do, um, just shading on the character itself. Uh, but yeah, I think that's where I'm going to stop for now. And I'll catch you guys next week. Yeah, Mondays 12 to 1. Blender Brunch for us. Feel free to come with your questions and all that. Thanks. Have a good one.